So welcome to part 2 of What Do We Believe In? And this look through the Nicene Creed, this creed that was written 1700 years ago to try and bring together all the different strands of Christian thinking so that we understand our faith better, so that we have a structure, so that we can see how things fit together to give consistency and integrity. So this week in part 2, we actually focus in on the thing that we began last week. Last week we started talking about the Trinity, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Now we actually focus in on the Father. The Nicene Creed says we believe in God the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth. And we focus in on this idea of this aspect of the Trinity, this personality who created everything. So he created this beautiful world in which we live. He created the furthest star, and it's on a vastness of scale which indicates just how enormous, how massive this God is. This God who created all of this, and yet, as that wonderful song says, he holds us in the palm of his hand. This God who, if God is infinite, he has to be even bigger than the creation that we see around us. That's an enormous sense of this Father, this fatherhood of God who creates us, who sustains us. But it's also this sense that he wants that relationship. We may be in the palm of his hand. He wants us to know him. He wants us from the very beginning of creation. He wants you and I to know him personally. And that's why Jesus Christ comes. But God, this Father, this maker of heaven and earth, we're reminded that everything around us is the product of his hand, the product of his work. Now, the creed begins with God the Father. It begins with the idea of this Father figure. The Bible begins with, in the beginning, God. And God, we have this sense of God creating the perfect world in Genesis 1. We have this image that whoever wrote Genesis 1 wanted to create this picture. Now, the difficulty is we get caught up with things like creation and evolution and all these arguments. Now, remember, the creed doesn't mention how God did it. It just says that God is. Remember that when Moses met God in that burning bush and he says, well, who are you? God says, I am who I am. In other words, mate, don't even try to work out what I look like. Don't even try to think you can describe me in terms that can articulate in English words. I'm too big for that. I am who I am. That's the God we're discussing now. So one of the things which will help us when we discuss these things is not to try and reduce God down to our level. Not try and reduce his thinking down to our level so we can understand it. But this idea of the Father figure that is the one that we come to, who says, I want to be your Father. I want to bring you this relationship. Now, when it comes to creation, that's inevitably the one thing that we focus in on. But we need to see that in the context of the whole of creation. In other words, not just that moment when God says, let there be, and there is, but that understanding of creation as a whole thing around us, the whole of life itself, what is happening in you and I. Ultimately, you and I, if we really stop and think, all these chemicals and all this water and whatever we're made of, what is special about you and I is that God has breathed his life into us. God has created you and I to be the pinnacle of his creation. We are this wonderful. What does it says in Psalm? It says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You and I are creations of God. It's there to sense that wonder of the Creator God who holds us in his hand, the one who is the ultimate, the Almighty, the one who sustains us, who completely keeps us in life, the Creator of heaven and earth. So in this session, enjoy thinking about all of this.